Welcome back, MIS 102 students. Here we are, week 3, chapter 4. Hey, before we get into the PowerPoint, I want to remind you, start looking at your final MIS paper this week. Get an idea of what hardware, what information systems you want to write about as your topic. And please email me these topics beforehand. So chapter 4 is all about hardware, software, and mobile systems. Hey, what do business professionals need to know about computer hardware or even computer software? If you are a manager, if you are even a C-suite executive, you need to have a basic 3,000-foot view of certain terms that might be thrown up. You can be going through a massive upgrade of systems. You might even be buying new systems. You need to know some of these terms. You need to know some of the lingo so you can make the best decision for your company. You've probably heard CPU, or Central Processing Unit. This is the brains of your computer. This is the device that does all of the processing. And there's a lot of different categories applied to this. We have single core processors, dual core processors, quad core processors. How fast do these things operate? What is their function? Some are very specialized processors that really can't run an operating system, but work really great in specialized devices. A common theme, whether it's software or hardware, we want to buy the right device for the right job. So your CPU works in conjunction with your main memory. This is your RAM, random access memory. Everything you see on your screen right now is living in RAM. It needs to be pulled and accessed and manipulated very quickly. But as soon as we hit save, then it goes onto your hard drive. It goes onto your thumb drive. The difference between the two is RAM is volatile. As soon as we pull the power away, as soon as you turn your device off, anything that's living, quote unquote, living in RAM goes away. But what you saved on your hard drive, what you saved on your SSD, thumb drives, optical discs, even floppy drives if you're still using one, this will be there once the power is removed. Hey, a hardware term you might not be familiar with is server farm. Hey, a server farm is just a bunch of servers networked together. We have a lot of processing power, a lot of storage power. Some of these are millions and millions of dollars, even into the billions of dollars for massive cloud computing server farms. And these maintain a staff of 40 to 80 people to operate. This is really high-end industrial stuff. Anytime you access Google Cloud, you save a Google document, it's living somewhere in the world in a server farm similar to this picture. Everything in your server farm on the hard drive on your computer is stored in binary digits. These are ones and zeros. Easy way to represent this is with the light switch. It's either on or off. If it's on a magnetic spinning hard drive, we have magnetism. It's either positively or negatively charged, 0 or 1. If we're talking about optical media with a laser looking at a CD or a DVD, we either have a reflection or we don't, 1 or 0. How can new hardware affect your competitive strategies? Companies need to be willing to adapt and grow with new innovations. Look back at the blockbuster Netflix analogy we talked about before. Right now there's 4 really big things happening and constantly developing. Internet of Things is becoming smarter and more accessible. Digital reality, this is augmented reality, 3D goggles, these are becoming cheaper and they're becoming more useful. It's not such a novelty anymore. Self-driving cars are a reality. We have these things right now and they're only getting better. And I think it's realistic, probably within a couple years, to start seeing self-driving UPS or FedEx or postal trucks driving around, dropping off packages at your house. And finally, 3D printing was just revolutionizing prototyping. So you might not be familiar with Internet of Things or IoT, but you probably heard of it. We're taking everyday objects and making them smarter. We're putting sensors in them. We are connecting them to the internet, and we're farming data from these things to come up with really good analytics. Think back 20 years ago, it wouldn't occur to anybody to have a TV hooked up to the internet. Well, why would we need that? I had a desktop back then. I don't need a TV hooked up to the internet. Now it's hard to buy a TV that isn't hooked up to the internet. This is how we ingest most of our media. We stream it. We use Netflix. We use Amazon Prime. I was at the hardware store the other day, and they're now selling refrigerators that are smart refrigerators. There's a touch screen in it. It's access to the internet. I can have recipes on there. I can get warnings. Hey, I need to buy more milk, or this thing's going to expire. This is what the Internet of Things is all about. And when we combine this in the buildings, we get smart buildings. How many of you have walked into a dark room and as soon as you walked in, all the lights came on? Well, simply that's just a motion sensor. That itself doesn't make that room smart. But when we combine that motion sensor with data logging, when we combine that with our HVAC, our heating, cooling, and ventilation system, we can get a lot of really useful data to develop trends so we can automatically turn certain things off or turn them on. Hey, maybe every week on Wednesday at 10 o'clock, a lot of people go into this room. Well, the computer that runs the system can start predicting that, and maybe at 9 o'clock in the summer, turn on the AC, or in the winter, start turning on the heat to get that room ready for everybody, and then turning it off as they start to leave. When we have a really good and mature smart building system, it saves the company a lot of money because it does a lot of predictions to help with our energy costs. Digital reality devices. This will change our life as it matures and becomes more available. One thing we see it happening already is in training environments. Before, if let's say we did a really specialized job, maybe we are working on equipment and say diesel engines. So we would have all of our new hires who want this job, and they would go into a room with a whole bunch of diesel engines, and they would work on it with wrenches and tools and start manipulating things. And that's great. That's hands-on learning, but it's very expensive because we have to have all this equipment, we have to have all this tools, support equipment, support staff to keep everything running properly for students to learn. Now we're starting to see using augmented reality and mixed reality where we can create training environments in essentially empty rooms where if they wanted to turn a valve, they'd be physically touching a valve, but inside their goggles, they would see their hands turning the real valve on the real system and all of the effects that that valve causes. Digital training is going to be the wave of the future. We see large industry investing a lot into augmented training. We see the military investing a lot into augmented training. This is just going to trickle down, eventually getting into academic and even in the grade school level, where hey, we're still going to go on field trip, but we might not need to actually go somewhere. We can augment reality, different museums and different classroom scenarios right inside your average day-to-day class. 3D printing. This is something that really excites me, and not just because I bought one recently. We are now allowing the average individual the ability to create almost anything. A couple months ago, I had a hinge break on one of our cabinets. And for the life of me, I could not find a hinge that fit perfectly. And I really didn't want to have to go and route out more space in the cabinet for a replacement hinge. So I just downloaded an open source version of CAD, took some measurements, mocked it up, printed 2 or 3 iterations, and, I had a hinge that fit perfectly and worked just as well as the old ones. Visually, you really can't tell unless you get close and inspect it. The great thing about 3D printing is prototyping. Before, if a company developed widgets or whatever you want them to develop, they would mock it up in CAD and then they'd have to send it off to probably a specialized plant to make a small run of these things so they could get it back into the office, play around with it, and make changes. Now, within a matter of hours, we can print mock-up prototypes of devices that we eventually want to manufacture. But the great thing, because we made it in-house, it's very easy to tweak and make different changes. Hey, the next couple of slides dare you, but I want you to have an understanding of the cost of free apps. We don't really own applications or software. A lot of times we pay for a license. But if you're not paying for a software, is the software the product or are you the product? So there's a really good example over the next 3 slides about a flashlight app. So this is just a general run-of-the-mill application you would download from either iStore or the Android market, where it's a flashlight. It turns your flashlight on and off, and that's it. anytime you download a new application, sometimes it asks for permissions, and there could be a blanket statement, or it might ask permissions for a lot of different things. Some of them are, pretty straightforward. Hey, I have a flashlight application. Well, it needs to take pictures and videos. Okay, that makes sense. If I'm taking a picture or a video in a low light environment, I want to have a light on. But there's some things in here are a little alarming. Hey, why does my flashlight need to receive data from the internet? Why is it even talking to the internet? You know, why does it modify system settings? Why does it prevent my device from sleeping? These are things that you give up when you buy, or not buy, when you download a free application. These ones really concern me. Each one of these applications want full network access. Hey, they want to retrieve what other apps you're running. They want to modify or delete contents of your storage, and they want to read contents of your storage. This is just a program that turns on and off a flashlight, but it is being very obtrusive into your using your device, what other applications you're using, what networks we're using. If I know what networks you're on, I can have an idea of where you are in the world. And if we're using other apps for having access to your GPS, I can, as the developer of this LED super flashlight application, I could sell this information to other companies for marketing purposes. This is how we get targeted ads. A lot of targeted ad companies buy this data from other companies that develop free applications. We want to view Wi-Fi connections. We want to read the phone status and identify your phone. The last one here, install shortcuts. This may not seem like a big deal, but we're giving this application permission to install things on our system. That's concerning. And finally, hey, we talked about GPS, approximate location and precise location. These are two different but very similar things, and a lot of it has to do with how exact your GPS is. It might say, hey, I'm in Johnstown, great, but I'm, on this street. Well, then we can target and we can change the ads a little more precisely on where you are. And all this is for the app developer to make some money. They developed this app for free, probably has very little overhead for them to develop it. Let's be honest, it's a flashlight app. Turns your flashlight on and off. But by downloading it and giving it all of these different permissions, they can mine that information, they can sell it to marketers, and they can make money off of your habits. So again, hey, this wasn't meant to scare you, but this is something that we need to understand. Nothing is free, and especially in the digital world, nothing is truly free. The product you download isn't necessarily the product in question. You are the product. Your browsing habits, your location, just the people you interact with, the stores you interact with. This is a lot of money in a marketing environment that companies want to capitalize on. All right, hey, so continue on with your homework. As always, if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.